Hello, Garland Nixon here with Mark Sleboda, and Donald Trump's inauguration has happened. Contrary to my belief, he made it there. He made it there alive. And of course, we're getting the usual blatant contradictions between what Donald Trump says on Monday and what he says on Wednesday. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here Thursday, and we have the brilliant and cynical. And I think those two things kind of go together.
More cynical than brilliant.
Yeah. But you know what? I think it's a cynical brilliance. And can you really be brilliant without being cynical? I would argue not. But at any rate, based on, you from a historical context. At any rate, Mark Sleboda, welcome back. And where can everybody find all your stuff online?
Garland, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show, but it's also just great to chat with you, as we've done for so many years now, weekly. You can follow me on Twitter X at Mark Sleboda1, and you can also find me on Telegram and Substack at The Real Politique with Mark Sleboda.
Thank you very much. All right, Mark, let's go. And this is something Mark and I have talked about in the past, and that is, and I'm going to get Mark's thoughts, the contradictions. Trump is like this. One day, Hamas better do what I say or there'll be hell to pay. The next day, hey, baby, take the deal. They take the deal, right? One day, clearly, Ukraine screwed up, Biden's people screwed up. Why in the hell did they have to go to Russia's border? I understand how Russia feels, and I ain't giving them another dime, and blah, blah, blah. The next week, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. We'll sanction everybody, and we'll do this blatant contradiction dated sometime in the same day with Donald Trump. He contradicts everything that he said. Mark, let's get your take on it.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any question. I think the consensus is that one of Trump's most common tactics, I wouldn't necessarily call it a stratagem, but one of his most common tactics is playing, what they call the madman theory, where he goes completely overboard and wants you to believe that he will do just about anything. And he usually initially exaggerates and overstates a position, and then is willing in his deal to accept something more reasonable. And, that it does have a certain history in international relations. Richard Nixon, not your not namesake, but
close enough.
But I think that Trump's negotiating style comes from his supposed success in New York real estate, and the world of high diplomacy and geopolitics is many things, but it's not New York real estate negotiations. So can it work? All right, let's take a look at, he's failed within his own administration, in his first administration, to do many things like pull troops out of Syria, pull troops out of Afghanistan, and so forth. But if we take a look at again, we don't know that it was he who necessarily pressed it, his envoy to the Middle East, through some combination of carrot and stick that as of yet we are all in the dark about. Suddenly, Netanyahu turned around and accepted a ceasefire deal that had been on the table since last year, put forward nominally by the United States, But there's no indication that the Biden administration actually wanted or expected him to take it. Certainly, I don't believe that there was any pressure in that regard coming from Antony Blinken, who seems to have been the absolute point man of the Biden administration on everything to do with the Middle East. But suddenly, Netanyahu turns around in the hour, the final day and hours before Trump's inauguration, and accepts the ceasefire deal, which we don't know all the details of either, because all the details have never been published. But we do know that it involves a hostage exchange between Israel and Palestine. I mean, if you want to play the racist game, you can call the Palestinians held by Israel prisoners. I mean, what they're an occupying state, right? What justification they have to take prisoners is another question. But we know certainly that Hamas considers them hostages, and if their people are taken hostage by the Israeli government, they felt perfectly entitled to take Israelis hostage in return. And that was part of their calculus for doing so, whether you morally agree with that or not. And now, as part of this deal, Hamas makes out because Israel is releasing thousands of hostages and has already released at least hundreds in return for a handful of hostages being released. It's being done in a phased sequence, and Israeli media is the government was obsessed with all these Palestinians are going to be celebrating the release of their people. We have to stop that. We have to stop them from celebrating, which is just an amazing amount of emergency management. But also, Israel is supposed to, in phase, withdraw from all of Gaza, including the Gaza-Egyptian border, right? Two things that they said they were never going to do. And Hamas is going to effectively remain in power.
That's a defeat. That's a defeat.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a defeat. Hamas and Palestinians are holding the victory signs, running around. Yeah. And might I add, the Israelis are protesting, saying, "Hey, we lost."
Yes. We've seen Ben Gvir, two ministry officials pull out of the far right, pull out of Trump's, Netanyahu's coalition government over this because they didn't agree with it. Now, Netanyahu is making very clear that this is temporary. He said outright, we're going to get our hostages back and then we're going to resume operations. But we also know that the Israeli military is exhausted, right? They have never fought, and they're not geared up to fight long wars. They're geared up to fight short, intense wars that Israel has, very, shall we say, focused goals. They accomplish, or they declare that they accomplished them, and then they pull back. And this has already gone on for over a year, well over a year, and it's only expanding because the ceasefire with Hezbollah, which Israel never really followed anyway, is expiring. May already be expired. It's very close. Israel is now occupying increased amounts of southern Syria beyond the Golan Heights, and they're building apparently military bases there. So they don't intend to go anywhere. And they, for the first time, struck at the new Al-Qaeda Hayat Tahrir al-Sham regime in Damascus. They specifically hit their forces. So, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham proclaiming, we want to be friends with the Israelis. Yes, we're radical Islamists, but we love Israel, right? And Israeli bombs them. That's not working out so well for them. They attempted to play the Western stooge in that regard, and well, I can't say that I feel any sympathy for them. But And they're, continuing fighting with Yemen, which has never stopped its blockade and occasional drone and missile strikes, and the ever threat of Iran, lurking behind this. And we know that Hamas itself has the Western press. They all talk about how Hamas has reconstituted its forces. Well, how can that possibly happen, right? Israel is supposedly, we were told, one of the best militaries in the world. How is that possible? And it's real simple. If you kill a family, right, of 10 people, and you kill half that family, however many you kill, you've just generated at least that number of more people who in this type of society that the Palestinians live in, who are now dedicated to seeking revenge and sign up, right? I mean, that's a no-brainer. That we talked about that last year in October, that would be the inevitability of this. That when you're fighting this type of anti-terror, counterinsurgency type thing, that when the population supports whom you are trying to purge, you kill civilians and you just self-regenerate, these forces. So that should be as no surprise to anyone. Why it is simply, I guess, blind wishful thinking to the contrary, which is really stupid. But we heard lots of people, say that the idea that the Palestinian people could be separated from Hamas and Hamas would wither away and other nonsense like that. Usual neocon nonsense and justifications for the things. But the point is that Israel is militarily overstretched. They are economically overstretched and in a recession because this has disrupted their economies. They were actually highly dependent on small scale trade with the Palestinians for agriculture, for produce and other jobs that particularly the Palestinians in the West Bank did that are now off the table because of all of this. And all of the Israelis, reservists who have been called up to service over this, is a big drain on the economy, particularly Israel's, high-tech IT and services sector. So a big drain on all of this. So I believe that the Israeli military needed a ceasefire. It doesn't mean that they want a permanent peace. They wanted a ceasefire. And, the question is this all being done? And is Trump expediting the supply of resupply of weapons to Israel? I don't know, but I would guess so, personally. Because does anyone think that just the Trump wielding the madman stick against Netanyahu suddenly made him turn about? No, I don't think so. And in the meantime, we've already seen Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces, turn on Jenin in the West Bank, and Israeli media is openly talking about annexing the entirety of the West Bank. So pull out of, sign a ceasefire, get the hostages exchanged for the talking points for Trump's inauguration when he said he would announce that, and then a month later or two, you can annex the entirety of the West Bank. Was that part of the discussion? We don't know, but I'm pretty sure we're going to find out. And I don't think that Netanyahu was completely cowed by Trump's bluster and just agreed to the ceasefire under threat and didn't get anything out of it. Nothing that I have known in the long history of Netanyahu as the leader of Israel says that is likely. So we'll find out going forward. But at least the hostage exchange on both sides happened, which was already more than the Biden administration was able to accomplish or wanted to accomplish. Take your pick. So, we're left with judging the foreign policy effectiveness of Trump's madman theory. It appears to work in some situations and not. In Greenland, which Trump evidently King Donald the Orange of Greenland has declared is going to become part of the United States. I've seen the memes with Trump dressed up as a Viking chieftain. The U.S. already has military bases in Greenland, right? And Greenland, the people there, while not necessarily all on board with becoming part of the United States, are using the situation to make increased calls for independence from Denmark, which is something that Denmark, of course, does not certainly appreciate. But as a result of Trump saying he wants to annex Greenland, whether it comes through an agreement with the government of Denmark or through an agreement with a more autonomous or independent government of Greenland, certainly increased U.S. basing rights and mineral resources access is certainly now on the table. I mean, there's no question. So if that happens, that would be, and the same thing with the Panama Canal. Does anyone really believe that U.S. Marines are going to walk in and take over the Panama Canal? No. Do I believe that over, Trump's declarations about that the Panamanian government will perhaps renegotiate the fees for U.S.-based shipping to pass through the Panama Canal? Absolutely. And if so, that would be another success for the madman theory. Now, let's see how the madman theory works against the cold-blooded, pragmatic Vladimir Putin of Russia, because the very first communication as president, as the inaugurated president of the United States, that Trump has had with the Russian president, it's not been, of course, a face-to-face meeting. It's not even yet at this moment. There hasn't been a phone call. We haven't even for sure that it's been arranged that they're, they keep talking about wanting to talk, but we haven't heard that. But Trump went on social media and has spoken to directly addressing the Russian president, but also the world, the American people in the world, in doing so, and has made a post on social media coming from, at real Donald Trump, his account. And he said, "I'm not looking to hurt Russia. I love the Russian people, and I've always had a very good relationship with President Putin. And this despite the radical left's Russia hoax. We must never forget that Russia helped us win the Second World War, losing almost 60 million lives in the process." What? Can you see them in the Kremlin? We helped you win the Second World War, right? Who was it that occupied Berlin? Who raised their flag above the Reichstag? I mean, maybe in Trump's golden America dreams, it was the United States. But it's not actually the way it happened. And that right there, I'm going to tell you, every Russian took offense to. Russians have no problem admitting that the aid, right, the Americans entered the war rather late in the game, and they love talking about how much Lend-Lease spam and toy Sherman tanks that could only be sent to the Japanese front because they couldn't stand against German tanks for anything. But they love talking about how Lend-Lease won the war, right? Because they helped the Soviet Union won the war. All right. I mean, if that's your feeble excuse for letting Soviet boys and girls die well, your boys and girls, played with themselves at home for another couple years. Right? That's the way that's the way they look at it over here. That they did the dying, and that your sending of spam and toy Sherman tanks, I mean,
Hey,
thanks.
Mark, but he gave them an additional 33 million casualties.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. All right. So that's another thing. Most of the assessments of the academic assessments of Soviet casualties, military and civilian, during World War II are more around the 30 million mark, not the 60 million mark. But
that would probably be like 50% of the population or something back then, wouldn't it?
Not that. I mean, we're talking the Soviet Union, not Russia.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yes, it was a lot bigger, but still, he gave him 33 million.
Yeah, he doubled it. Anyway.
It was a bargaining thing, the art of the deal. Okay, I'm going to take away credit for winning, but I'll give you an extra 33 million casualties.
Okay, all right. So right there, he rubbed the Kremlin the wrong way. I'm going to say that right there. All of that being said, I'm going to do Russia, whose economy is failing. I know they repeat this nonsense in the Western media, right? But I live here. Maybe you'll notice that in the past 3 years of Russia's intervention, that in terms, according to the World Bank and the IMF and the United Nations, right, that Russia's GDP per purchasing power parity has jumped 2 places, has jumped both Germany and Japan, and is now the first largest in the world after China, the United States, India, and Russia. But their economy is failing. Russia has, in the last 3 years, for the first time, become an official high-income country because the average salaries of Russians and living standards have raised so much. But hey, they have a little more inflation than us right now, so the Russian economy is failing. All right, so one, he is either lying, which I don't know. I mean, I don't, if he's addressing the Russian president and lying, we have to assume that lie is directed at the American people, not the Russian government. Or he's completely ignorant and being fed bad information already by the slew of neocons and blob around him. And he's repeating what they told him and believes it, which is probably an even bigger problem for the future of relations and negotiations. And I'm betting it's actually the latter.
And with Trump, that's where you're always left.
Yeah.
You're always left that he said something so absurd, over the top, or ridiculous that you have to try to scratch your head and like.
But this is something that's repeated as a matter of fact across the entirety of the Western mainstream media too, right? Despite all evidence for the last 3 years to the contrary, they continue to push this. From Jen Psaki, the ruble is rubble, the ruble is rubble, all the way up till today, right? So all that being said, I'm going to do Russia, whose economy is failing, and President Putin a very big favor.
Oh, how generous of him.
Yeah, how generous. Settle now and stop, in big capital screaming imperative letters, stop this ridiculous war. Yes, it's absolutely ridiculous. Russia had no good reasons to launch this, and that coming from the American president. And then in all screaming caps again, it's only going to get worse. That sounds like a threat. That sounds like Trump is threatening the Russian president and screaming at him in all capital letters, which is, even in social media, a crazy person's social faux pas, a no-no, right? If someone in my comments is all screaming in capital letters, I either ignore them or immediately block them, right? I'm just saying. So if we don't make a quote, unquote, scare quotes for some reason, deal, and soon, I have no other choice but to put high levels of taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on anything being sold by Russia to the United States. Oh, you mean like that uranium that you're still buying up like hotcakes because, I don't know, you need it? I mean,
but we can buy from it. Hey, but we can still get oil from India that may have at some time passed through Russia, or maybe even originated in Russia and went to India. But that's not Russian oil because, like, it went to India for a while, or maybe the manifest or something passed through India, and as it hit it straight.
Yeah, if you want to pay Indian middlemen a markup, I mean,
Yeah,
that's all you.
Well, Mark, here's a bet. Here's a bet for everybody out there. Next week, when we talk, hopefully we'll talk next week, we'll be reviewing the latest Donald Trump statement, which will be like the opposite. Zelensky's a madman, and we got to get out of here right away. The Europeans are crazy, and I don't know why they ever did this. And Putin will be like, next week, there'll be another statement. It will be reviewing. I'll put it like this. You know where I am, Mark? I go by what he says. That's all I can do now is go by what Donald Trump, go by what Donald Trump does. I am at a point where when he makes these stuff, I understand that it'll freak you out. I'm at a point now, I'm just like, you know what? I'll believe it when I see it, Donald Trump. I'll believe even a deal with the Russians. I'll believe it when I see it. What's happening in Israel. Okay, for now, the first phase has started and they're doing this. That's all we got. Is the second phase going to work? Is he going to continue to push him? Is he going to do money? I think whatever I see happen, I got to have something happen because what the hell? I don't know. Donald, I've never seen a world leader who can contradict himself, 180-degree contradictions from day to day. But just
that's a problem. But let's finish this up quickly.
Okay, yeah.
And various other participating countries. Let's get this war, which never would have started if I were president. Well, maybe you shouldn't have sanctioned Russia the first time and provided lethal weapons to Ukraine and never pushed them to fulfill the Minsk agreements. But we'll leave that on the side. Over with. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. All right. Mafia Don Trump, right? Making threats to the Kremlin. Maybe. You want to do this the hard way, Putin? Vladimir? I think you want to do it the easy way, right? I mean, this is Hollywood.
But he didn't define the hard way. The hard way
easy way is
let him fight it out.
Better. It's time to make a deal. Screaming capitals. Continue screaming capitals. No more lives should be lost. This is his first communication to the Russian president. Oh my God. Right? I'm afraid, we're left in a position with Trump then where we have to selectively choose what we believe he says and what we don't want to believe that he says, right? That's a very bad position. And I'm going to suggest that his coherency is not just a matter of his tactics or his lack of coherency, is that he has no coherency, right? He doesn't have any strongly or has very few strongly held opinions or beliefs and is swayed by whatever conversation or disinformation most impressed him that he had in the last 15 minutes. And that's a problem, right? Because John Bolton, in his memoirs, right, previously hired onto the Trump administration, openly talked and gloated about how everyone around him worked on how to manipulate Trump and was largely successful in doing so.
Well,
making threats, screaming capital threats to the Russian president in his first communication with him is not off to a good start, Garland. It's not off to a good start. And in Russia's perspective, which I happen to agree with, or anyone who's actually familiar with the actual history of World War II beyond Saving Private Ryan, of the importance of the Soviet role compared to the American role in the Allied victory. That is another, shall we say, diplomatic red line that Donald Trump is doing his little shimmy all across right now.
I'll tell you what I would be doing. I bet you the Russians have a group of their best, like, psychological profilers and psychiatrists and stuff in the Kremlin, sitting around every day going over all the things Trump's doing, comparing him to his psychological profile, trying to figure out what he's doing, what he's saying, and by now they're probably all taking shots of vodka.
Screw it. They've got to be. I mean, he is. Everyone laughed when Putin said that he preferred at one point to see Kamala Harris as president, or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, because of predictability. Donald Trump is inherently unpredictable. And when you're dealing with nuclear armed, the two, at least in terms of nuclear armed superpowers, predictability, considering the game theory logic that always comes with mutually assured destruction, is vastly preferable to unpredictability. And he's the chaos bomb. The chaos bomb is now the first bouncing Betsy swing all over the Russian-American relationship. Boom, transatlantic relationship. Boom, the blob. Boom, Israel. And then spins across the world and goes off on Russia. That was the first chaos bomb explosion in this direction. All I can say is we can choose to believe this. We can choose to disbelieve it. But it is the first communication that he has had with the Russian side in childish, ignorant, disinformation-filled, screaming capital letters and mafia-like threats to the Russian president.
Yeah, it's for Donald Trump, it's Thursday morning. You know what I mean? I'll put it like this, though. I'll say this. If anybody, I saw somebody in the chat say, what they said, the MAGA people are having buyer's remorse. If anybody out there would rather have Kamala Harris, then, best of luck to him. But my prediction was we wouldn't live a year. There's no way we'd survive. Maybe 6 months, a year, under half. No way we'd survive. We were done. We were finished. But at any rate, I
think that those psychological profilers, of which Putin himself, being former KGB, certainly always reads those profiles before he goes in. I think what they're saying, what Putin, after talking with, this brain trust over this email, turns to his Secretary of Defense and his Minister of Defense and his Belousov now, and his Foreign Minister Lavrov. And I have to believe that he's saying, F this lunatic. Make sure that we have enough logistics to go all the way to Kiev and the Polish border. We're not, just go. And don't pay any attention to anything this lunatic says.
Yeah, I'd be like this. My advice, if Putin said to me, what do you think, I'd say, wait till Saturday. He'll tweet the opposite. And then wait till the next Tuesday. Then he'll tweet the opposite again. Okay, but we got to get to Europe. We got to get to Europe. We got to get to that godforsaken hellhole that is totalitarian Nazi bloc that is Europe. I did want to ask you about the guy Georgescu, or whatever his name in Romania. Is he back? He was gone, and then they said it was TikTok, and then we found out that the liberal pro people had actually bought, they created the false flag thing that they claimed was Russian disinformation. Now I'm hearing that his numbers are back. Is this guy Georgescu, whatever his name is he back? Are they going to let him run? What the hell's going on?
There's nothing been decided yet.
Okay.
Right? It's a lot like in Germany, how they keep floating with the ideal of banning the AFD, now the largest opposition party in the country, right before elections, right? The Romanian political elite, the Romanian deep state, the blob, they're terrified of Georgescu coming to power. And regardless of what he does in domestic affairs, that's never really what anyone matters. It's most important is that he could flip Romania's policy, foreign policy, by what he said, and become, a shall we generously say a Kiev regime skeptic, and become the next Hungary and
the anti-NATO, anti-EU bloc. We can see there to me is there is a growing bloc.
Yeah,
and
I don't know if that's correct to say anti-EU, anti the current liberal technocratic makeup, right? They don't. I don't actually believe, for instance, that Hungary, that Orban on Hungary wants to leave the EU or NATO. He wants to push his own agenda in those bodies, right? And he's certainly against everything to do with the proxy war, the sanctions war on Russia. But that doesn't necessarily translate in Hungarian terms as anti-NATO, anti-EU. It's anti the current leadership of the EU and NATO, but that's a different story. Yeah,
Schultz,
but
Starmer, how about this? Opposed to that cabal,
and then
the growing opposition. I think they're afraid because they see country after country falling to an opposition to that particular cabal. Shall we say?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, cabal. I like that. Yeah, I like that. So yeah, the Romanian Supreme Court has refused to put forward a date under which future elections will be held and under what conditions they will be held, and whether Georgescu will be allowed to run or not. So everything is up in the air. But there are the protests in Romania against the annulment by the Supreme Court under false pretenses of the first round of the elections, which Georgescu won a plurality, right? The protests continue, and Georgescu's poll approval numbers continue to increase. So that has, I mean, can you imagine a Central and East European bloc of now Hungary and Slovakia and potentially Romania and potentially Austria and perhaps others, right? That comes out solid, this whole bloc in opposition to the current, NATO, Ruta, or von der Leyen in the EU Commission position on Ukraine. Their entire, Project Ukraine proxy war, regardless of what Trump does or not, would collapse. But of course, what Trump does very much has an effect on what's happening in Europe, because Orban is increasingly encouraged, right, by Trump now being the president, to call for, in louder terms, an end to the sanctions on Russia. Unlike in the United States, the majority of the EU sanctions have to be renewed every 6 months, right? And Viktor Orban is now threatening to veto those sanctions, saying that now is the time to end this disastrous policy. And he said before, it's not that we've shot ourselves in the foot with them, it's we've shot ourselves in the lungs, right? So he's doing this, and all of this is generating further momentum quietly to this political fracas in Romania as well, and possibly other places.
Let me ask you this. That's something I've wondered. I'm glad you brought that up. I think, Orban has talked in the past about not going along with the sanctions, but I think he feels like he's got Trump at his back. And I find it hard to believe he's doing this without having talked to Trump, because we know he talks to Trump. in the event, what is it, January 31st, we're a week or so away. In the event that Orban doesn't go along with it, and if the EU doesn't, find a way to get around that, the sanctions die, don't they? Do all of them die? What happens, Mark? What happens January 31st if Orban goes along with it and the EU doesn't, find a way around democracy, which they have a way of doing? What happens?
Okay, so first of all, they've previously arranged things where they've forced Orban to leave the room so he can't vote, right? Others say that they encouraged him to leave the room. They've threatened to remove Hungary's voting rights in the EU. They're already withholding millions of dollars worth of financing that the EU owes to Hungary over his geopolitical position, which is, forget anything about any type of EU rules-based system. This is pure, vindictiveness and weaponization of EU finances to put Hungary back in its place. They have a lot of tools that they can keep throwing at Hungary. But they may also throw something in as a sweetener. Previously, the sweetener has always been, all right, well, you can stay out of this and we'll give you all the exceptions in the world, as long as you don't block the rest of the EU. And he's gone along with that. But he may feel more emboldened now. Now, it wouldn't get rid of all EU sanctions overnight, right? And it certainly wouldn't get rid of sanctions from each individual member state, which are applied selectively. But it would get rid of a significant chunk of EU bloc sanctions, right, against Russia. So it's important to say that Orban has threatened this before and never carried through on it, right? It would be a huge deal. And I don't think that it's probably quite there yet. He's probably doing this as leverage on something, maybe on getting released those millions, tens of millions of euros that are due to Hungary. That
turning on the gas back on, maybe something like that.
That would, unfortunately, that depends on Kiev, not on the EU. And he has, I don't even think that Hungary and Ukraine are really talking to each other. They might be yelling at each other at this point. But I don't see much room for constructive engagement with Kiev on the issue. But I mean, the EU perhaps could be working as a middleman. I mean, Orban could be saying, you get our gas turned back on or I'm not going to do this. And then they have to go and they have to apply the screws or the carrot and the stick to Zelensky. So I guess that's possible. We'll find out, right? But I would still guess that the likelihood is that he will not veto it, that some deal will be made with the EU, with Kiev, and Hungary will be placated once again for this process. But we know also that Fico, the far left, but also Kiev regime skeptic, Prime Minister of Slovakia, who survived an assassination attempt by a pro-Kiev regime extremist. He has said that there is essentially a color revolution, a regime change attempt by the EU and probably the United States as well, right now taking place, trying to bring him down in Slovakia using a no confidence vote being declared by the opposition in against Fitzo's leadership, and you can bet that the U.S. and the EU, well, we don't know
the
the
U.S.
US.
I'm not so
We don't
sure
know how
anymore.
Trump, I believe, that probably doesn't have 100% control of the deep state apparatus, at this point, and probably never will. So, but we can bet that there are screws being applied, blackmail, threats, promises to each individual parliamentarian in Slovakia to try to sway his vote on this, because they want Fico brought down. They definitely want Fico brought down. He's even a bigger threat in some ways than Orban. Hungary, of course, is a bigger and slightly more important country than Slovakia in many terms. But Fico is not just doing this solely out of national interests like Orban is doing. Fico is a Russophile. He's a leftist and a Russophile. So I think he presents an even greater ideological threat in that regard to the hegemonic center of the EU technocracy.
Well, one of the things I've been saying now is, you know what? I'm just going to judge the Trump people by what they do, because I don't know what the hell he's talking about half the time, and it always contradicts itself. Here's what I think.
Unfortunately, what he does often also contradicts.
Yeah, you're right about that. The chaos bomb. You have patented that quote. I love it. It's perfect. I'll say this. I'm with you. I don't think it happens. But if it does, to me, if he does, then he did it because Trump was behind him. Then you know what I mean? If he did that, taking on the EU, he would do that because he had Trump behind. I don't think he just arbitrary by himself take on the EU like that. So we shall see. I'll put it like this. If it happens, we got to talk about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There'll be time for us to talk if that happens.
I absolutely, and I will be shocked. I won't be shocked. I will be surprised. I'm not ruling it out. I'm saying it's more likely the opposite. But right. I will consider it a very encouraging data point if he does do that. I will consider.
Let me ask you this: your thoughts on a country we don't talk about much, the UK. Keir Starmer has basically, the same percentage of people who support him as nail fungus. You know what I mean? This guy, Liz Truss and Sunak, and they've been going downhill for a while. I'll just say this. The UK they're pretty much broke. It's
by their own accounts, their military is, one step away from complete irrelevancy.
It's
right?
Pretty
by
much,
their own accounts.
It's pretty much I'll put it like this. Their military would have difficulty against a band of soccer hooligans right now. They'd struggle. They probably win, but I don't know how much money.
To be fair, there are some gangs of soccer hooligans that could overthrow some small governments.
I think you're right.
But they were actually in Ukraine instrumentally involved in the Maidan. I think I should point that out.
Don't underestimate soccer hooligans, right? Now, by the way, and
by the way, Garland, calling football soccer is so cute and American. By the way.
Yeah. Well, how about this? Now, this is the big stuff, man. The powerful military, the powerful the empire that the sun never sets of Great Britain and the UK has now signed a 100-year deal with Kiev. So darn you little Ruskies, you better watch it, because if you so much just breathe a breath on Kiev, now granted, he didn't run it through the parliament, he didn't anybody, but he has signed a deal. So Kiev knows if they have any problems right now with the Ruskies, all they got to do is call Keir Starmer, and he's going to send some soccer hooligans or whoever he's got available there for 100 years. 100 years of protection. What more could the Kiev regime ask for, Mark?
This is, a 100% information warfare and signaling. There is, if you read through the text of this 100-year security guarantee, it's nothing, right? There's nothing concrete in there. It's all hot air and empty promises and so forth. One, I have to say that I think it's actually indirectly, but still pointedly, an attack on any attempt by Trump to end the conflict.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Because the United Kingdom is, certainly they still have delusions that they're an important military and geopolitical player in the world. They've never quite gotten over that, end of the British Empire that the rest of the world was so grateful for, whatever they may believe and tell themselves, looking at you, Neil Ferguson, to the contrary, right? Certainly he is taking it a step in the exact opposite direction that many people believe Trump wants to take on the conflict. I'm choosing my words carefully there. Again, there's no substance to this. We often talk about the UK. There's one of the images that's brought up with the UK is as a bulldog, right? That has to do, of course, with Winston Churchill and some other things. Forget the bulldog, right? This is some little yappy lapdog. This is some little lappy yap dog that is speaking not for the new Trump administration, but for the U.S. deep state, the hegemon that they expect to be returned to form in 4 years once Trump is gone again. They are walking over to Ukraine and lifting up their leg, their little yap dog leg, and urinating on Ukraine to mark it as NATO Western territory in the face of the Russian bear, which is now like literally leaning over them and like, are you serious? Right? I mean, that's that's the situation. This is all it is literally they are attempting to mark Ukraine as Western territory, despite everything increasingly going in every bad direction. And they may very well intending also doing this on the knowledge that it will make it harder for Russia to engage in negotiations as well. It will make people in the Kremlin throw up their arms. And just like I said before, F these crazy people, give me the Polish border, right? I mean, that they will increasingly be, because Russia sees this coming out of the UK at the same time as we hear screaming capital letters and mafia threats coming from Trump against Russia as well. So in multiple ways, this is one, intended to mark Ukraine as their territory, and two, to present obstacles on both sides to any even intended momentum towards de-escalation on either side.
Yeah, I'm with you. I do think that the Russians also, in saying, which they've said, the leadership has said, we'll talk to the U.S., but we, as they say, we'll talk to the organ grinder, not the monkey. We ain't going to talk to any of the vassals of the monkeys. I think they know their pain because they're local and all that. But I think the Kremlin also realizes that these people are an annoyance. I'm watching the UK. I go online and I see all these people now. I don't know if you've seen it, saying, I'm getting out of here. This place is a disaster. Leave now if you can. It's in such bad shape. The idea that your country is drowning in it's falling apart. And as the world looks at it saying, what a basket case, you're still like, we're the Great Britain. We're strong. I'm looking at them like, really? You think you're fooling anybody? I don't get that, Mark.
These British delusions, I really don't understand where they come from, right? From their own internal reports in media. Their military has now shrunk to something like 73, 78,000 people. One of the big reasons is they're not able to get enough people to enlist in their military, which is why their outgoing the military chief was openly talking, we need a draft now to build an army to fight Russia. I don't think that that's even politically possible in the United Kingdom, but it tells you how crazy these people are. By their own accounts, they have enough munitions for less than a week of high intensity war with Russia. 1 week, right? They've given most of their heavy artillery to the United Kingdom already, and it's gone. This fiasco with they built these 2 aircraft carriers, never built the planes to fly off of them, and are now talking about mothballing both of them because they have neither the funding to keep them both afloat or the manpower in the Navy to operate both of them. They're shutting down multiple British warships, right? Naval ships, because they don't have enough recruits. They don't have enough manpower to keep them manned. And this is the country that's making military threats. And once again, we heard in the last week talks that the UK and France are in secret talks about sending troops to Ukraine. It's, of course, all about dragging the US in because, the UK and France are both talking a lot of military smack that neither one of them has the military to cash that check, right? We'll just say it right now. It's not so much that they're a paper tiger. They're a paper, I don't know.
They don't even have the paper to draw the tiger, but they don't have paper or an ink pen to draw a tiger with.
Yeah, they're a paper domestic hog. I don't know. It's they're
but
pathetic.
Luckily they got plenty of super glue,
and they still have this delusion that they're a major power. It's beyond me.
Yeah, it's absolute insanity. But that is them. All right, now before we leave, we do know that the one place in the EU where democracy is still strong, where they believe in the rule of law and letting the people choose, is Germany, as they discuss outlawing the party that's leading in the next elections, like you do in a democracy.
Yeah. Olaf Scholz was the current chancellor of Germany, right? The one that the Ukrainians kept referring to as liverwurst. When I say Ukrainians, I mean the Kiev regime ambassador to the former Kiev regime ambassador to Germany, right? Showing how much respect that they have for the German government. Scholz, of course, is facing elections that him and all of his current government is going to lose very badly, although still that seems is going to benefit more the mirror center-right party, the Christian Democratic Union, previously of former Chancellor Merkel instead, and probably lead to another grand coalition government. But the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, there's a rise. If you take a look at trends, the 2 parties in Germany that are showing the most growth are the quote-unquote far-right Alternative for Germany, the AfD, whom is running a woman as their co-chair, as the chancellor candidate, but also the far left Sarah Wagenknecht party, which is also both of those are critical of German sanctions on Russia and of the Western role, the German role in arming and continuing the proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. So while it is not yet a majority of German voters, the increase in political sentiment in that direction is alarming the German political elite to such a degree where they're just considering outlawing the biggest opposition party, the AfD, over this. It's been brought up many times before, and I don't think they'll actually go to that nuclear option. I think they'll probably come, they will pull back from it and just count on the Christian Democratic Union winning the largest share of the votes, and then a coalition government that will work to keep the AfD out of power. Much like what happened with the Le Pen's National Rally Party in France. But the idea that Germany is a free country, Garland, if you walked down a German street wearing an orange and black ribbon like this, symbolizing, support for Russia's war role in World War II, but also, general as a support of the SMO or Russia, you would be arrested, right? Why? Because freedom of speech, right? Russian media is outlawed in Germany. Why? Freedom of speech, right? Because, we have freedom of speech, just not for that speech.
No.
Right? Because that's the enemy. And it has been pointed out that recently by no less a person than Pavel Durov of Telegram and others, that Russia in many ways has more, not the one that presents itself as justifying its military actions around the world in the name of its superior democracy, like the West, like the US and the EU do, but that there is more freedom of speech. Not saying that there's complete freedom of speech, but there is more freedom of speech in Russia right now than there is in many European countries, certainly at the top of the list, like Germany, right? There's a whole list of if you try to fly a Palestinian flag in Europe, good luck with that, right? Because freedom, right?
One last thing. I know we're up to an hour, but I did want to get your thoughts on something internally in the U.S., right? Well,
where I haven't been in more than 2 decades.
Yes, but I know you're going to have a comment on this one.
Okay.
So in their infinite wisdom, the ADL and all form of Zionist entities got furious at TikTok and pushed for TikTok to go, and TikTok was gone for a day. But in anticipation of TikTok leaving, and in fact TikTok leaving, all of these young people jumped on the Red Note, which is an actual Chinese app. Me too. So I thought, what the hell? I'm not even on TikTok, but I never heard of Red Note. So I thought, oh, what the hell? Let me try it. I go on Red Note and I'm looking, and there's all these Chinese people. And here's what I love. Within 24 hours of that story getting out, Red Note started putting everything in English so all the Americans could see it, right? I go on there, and now I'm like, well, hell, I wonder what those high-speed trains look like. There's people showing me the high-speed trains. There's people showing you how to cook. Hey, wouldn't you like to learn Chinese? This is how you speak it. And you get all of these young people in America and all these people that are on TikTok saying, hey, we were lied to about China. It don't look so bad after all. The Chinese seem like they're nice. You know what I mean? And when I go on there, I'm kind of on Red Note regularly because I can see a lot of interesting things about China that I was curious about. And once I was China curious, I guess. Okay. I love Russia, but I'm China curious, right? And I see these things and I'm like, well, this is interesting. Holy moly, look at this. What it looks like in downtown Shanghai and on a Saturday night. Hey, this is cool, right? Man, did this thing backfire in their face. And now there's all these people saying, crap, I thought they were telling me that China was some commie hellhole. Looks pretty good. In some ways, some of the things look better. They're finding that you can look in the markets. You can see what they're selling. You can see the prices, how much it costs. Man, that was a mistake. Anyway, your thoughts on the Well, they call themselves the TikTok refugees. I've come up with a new term for them, the Red Note Renegades. But whatever. What are your thoughts about that, Mark?
My favorite video that I caught a clip off of that is it was an ongoing conversation of American middle class parents comparing medical bills with the Chinese, which was just it was so awful for the Americans that I almost started, to feel sympathy. I almost started to feel bad for them, right? One, I think that this shows what a crude and ineffective, heavy hand political censorship is, right? Let's be honest, right? At TikTok, it's all about political censorship.
Yeah.
We don't have control of the narrative. We don't have control, right? And what does it do? So they go all through this to outlaw TikTok, and overnight you have millions of accounts opening up on Red Note, right? As it shows the slow, ineffective nature of crude censorship like this, right? The unintended blowback of it. And, this actually facilitating a lot of more substantial political and life exchange between actual Americans and Chinese, including, of course, a lot of American youth, but more than youth as well, than was ever happening on TikTok.
Yeah.
Right, which was mostly selfie videos and music and stuff like that. I mean, it was far more than that, but the amount of real political exchange outside the control of the U.S. narrative that was happening in such a short period of time is just such dramatic blowback from that crude censorship attempt. It shows the ineffectiveness, no matter what country you're in, and how hard it is to predict when things go viral and how out of control it can become. So
yeah. Well, TikTok had gotten to like a bunch of silicone-filled women wiggling in short skirts. Not that I'm dramatically opposed to that. I'm just saying that was there. But like you said, what's amazing is it is really a cultural exchange. That's what I'm seeing. Like, people are deliberately going now because of that discussion. People are deliberately looking to talk to people in China. People are deliberately looking. I heard all about it, and that's when I thought, I've heard so much about high-speed rails. I want to see it. They're telling you how much it costs. They're showing you business class, all these things. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I'm clicking. And so it is truly a real-time cultural exchange that I just think it's good for humanity.
Yeah. It's another thing it's good for is Americans, those of you out there listening who come from that benighted land still, you live in a propaganda bubble. You really do. And I know you think that you have access to more free information than everyone else on the planet, but it's not true, right? You are being led a constant stream. At the same time, you are always told, right, that your enemies are China and Russia and Iran and North Korea. And at the same time, you're being told what terrible hellhole those those places are with collapsing economies and everything. Never pay attention to the contradiction between the threat and the description of those two places. And this is another puncture in that propaganda bubble. And it really, it started with my generation, right? With the Iraq War, right? With the reporting about weapons of mass destruction. And that was such a huge blow in my generation to the belief in the Western mainstream media's narrative and their control. A huge defection there. But now we see it accelerating to such a point. And if you take a look at the, belief in their mainstream media now by Americans, particularly young Americans, it's gone. I mean, they don't believe anymore, and this is just another nail in that coffin.
Yeah, they want to go out on their own and figure things out themselves. So I was just flashing stuff. That's interesting. We don't know what he's going to do, but that would be interesting. 20,000 troops. That's pretty much NATO's home. That's pretty much that's like twice the rest of what the rest of NATO could come up with altogether. So we don't know. Okay, Mark. Well, thanks a lot. Once again, where can everybody find all your good stuff? Are you on Red Note, by the way?
I am not on Red Note.
I should get on Red Note. I'm on Red Note.
I should probably open. I never did open up a TikTok account.
Me neither. I'm straight to Red Note. So I'm not a TikTok refugee. I'm straight the path to Red Note. But yeah.
By the next time we talk, I will have opened up a Red Note account just for you, Garland.
It sounds good. Where can everybody find you other than on Red Note very shortly?
Yeah, on that shortly. But in the meantime, at Twitter, X, at Mark Sleboda 1, and on Telegram and Substack, both The Real Politic with Mark Sleboda.
All right. So that's what I'm going to go with now. If you left TikTok or if you were forced off of TikTok and you went to Red Note, then you're a TikTok refugee. If you're like me, where you've never really were on TikTok, we're going to call ourselves Red Note renegades, straight to TikTok. We're pushing back against the system. How's that, Mark?
If Trump opens up a Red Note account, I'll just throw my hands up and give up on political prognostication.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. One question that people want to know: how much in American dollars? A gas bill, a monthly gas bill, for your heating and stuff in Russia would be how much in American dollars?
It's I don't know. I don't know exactly, because I got to be perfectly honest. The wife handles the finances, right? Yeah. But heating in Russia is nothing, right? We have central heating, right? All heating is connected together, right?
Okay.
It's it's government provided and controlled. And it has to be said that in some buildings heating is better than in others as a result of that, right? But we pay pennies on the dollar to what Americans pay for heating, right? Pennies to the dollar.
How about gas for driving? For
I don't drive. I take the metro. I don't have a car because Russia has the best public transportation system in the world, hands down. I mean, I love the Moscow metro. I haven't had to drive a car in 22 years, Garland, and I've never been happier. No insurance, no worries, no stuck in traffic, no gas bills, none of that. I take the Moscow metro, and I have to walk 10 minutes outside my house to get to the metro. But that's the only thing that preventing me from,
it's good for you. It's good.
It
actually is good for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how much does it cost to ride the metro?
Let's see here. Less than $1 will take you anywhere on the metro, right? A one trip. It's considerably less than $1 with the exchange rate right now. So about 70 cents. About 70 cents will take you anywhere in Moscow for one trip on the metro. And you can get discounts with, if you're using it every day, there are programs that you get.
Like you can get it like
40 cents per ride instead. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, we need to talk about that kind of stuff one day. Thanks a lot, Mark. Everybody, don't forget, follow Mark on Substack, follow Mark on Telegram, and soon on Red Note. But you can follow me on Red Note. All right. Thanks a lot, Mark. We're all out. Thanks, everybody. We are making our move.